The desert doesn't echo, it absorbs. You can scream, run, call for help, and the silence will still win. Heat rises from the ground in waves. Cactus bones rattle in the wind. And somewhere beyond the last paved road, people vanish. Not by mistake, not by weather, but because something is watching, just beneath the sand. And out here, there's no border between reality and hallucination. Only the dry air humming in your ears like a warning. Some disappear into craters that weren't there last week. Others answer voices coming from dead radios. And a few are never found at all, just their footprints ending mid-stride. Lock your doors, put on your headphones, because after this video, you'll never see Arizona the same way again. The woman who walked into the desert without her shoes. She said she had to get back to the light. Arivaca, Arizona, 2016. The Sonoran Desert doesn't forgive mistakes. It doesn't offer second chances. And it doesn't give back what it takes. In the early morning hours of June 12, 2016, a woman named Lisa Lynn Stone was seen walking barefoot along Arivaca Road, a dusty stretch of desert highway near the US-Mexico border. It was already 89 degrees before sunrise. No shoes, no water, no bag, just a tank top, denim shorts, and a look on her face that one driver later described as like she was listening to something I couldn't hear. She waved at no one. She walked with purpose. And when a border patrol agent slowed down to check on her, she simply smiled and said, "I have to get back to the light." Then she turned off the road, stepped into the scrub and disappeared into the desert. That was the last confirmed sighting of Lisa Stone. Later that morning, her phone was found in the dry riverbed of Alta Wash. Screen cracked, no signal, battery at 1%. Search crews were dispatched by sunset, helicopters, thermal imaging. Dogs. They found her footprints, clear, deep, following the wash for nearly 3 miles. Then they stopped, not faded, not scattered, stopped, mid-stride, as if she'd vanished in the middle of a step. There were no other tracks, no sign of struggle, no animal prints, and no evidence that she turned around. Lisa had no history of mental illness, no criminal record. She'd been staying at a friend's ranch just a few miles from where she was last seen, helping with horses, planning to move to Tucson the following month. Her friend, Maria Dumas, told investigators that Lisa had woken up unusually early that day. She'd made coffee, fed the dogs, and said something strange as she put on her sunglasses. "I don't think this is the right side anymore. I need to walk it back." Maria thought it was a joke, just Lisa being weird. But now those words feel like a map to nowhere. Over the next 3 weeks, the sheriff's office organized the largest manhunt in the area since 2001. Volunteers walked in 100-degree heat. Planes scanned the desert in widening spirals. But no trace of Lisa was ever found. No clothing, no hair, no bones. In late July, the case was quietly closed as a probable heat-related fatality. But one local ranger, who asked not to be named and says something doesn't add up. He was on the tracking team, and he followed her footprints himself. She wasn't staggering, she wasn't lost. She was walking in a perfectly straight line, like she had an exact destination. He also claims something else. At the very end of her trail, where her last footprint ends mid-step, the sand beneath it was compressed, deeper than it should have been, like she had suddenly become heavier in that final moment. A few weeks later, a hiker in the same region claimed to see a woman standing alone in the distance, barefoot, facing the sun. He waved. She didn't move. When he looked again, she was gone. To this day, there's no conclusive evidence of what happened to Lisa Lynn Stone. Her family still believes she's alive, somewhere, but locals say if you walk the trails near Arivaca after dark and stay silent long enough, you might hear footsteps in the sand, walking fast, straight ahead towards something no one else can see. But the next mystery didn't walk, it broadcasted, and only a few people were paying attention when it did. This is not a test, but no one scheduled the broadcast. Lake Havasu City, Arizona, 1997. At 6:42 a.m., on a quiet Tuesday in September of 1997, televisions across Lake Havasu City lit up with the familiar jarring tone of an emergency broadcast system alert. 3 tones, white screen, then static. But what followed wasn't the usual monotone voice about weather warnings or scheduled tests. It was different. 17 seconds of scrambled signal, low frequency distortion, and a voice that didn't sound human. Attention, secure perimeter breach, southwest quadrant unstable. Displacement observed. Subject remains active. Await further, then nothing. The screen cut back to regular programming. A cooking segment. The anchors looked confused, as if something had glitched behind the camera. Within minutes, the calls started. Residents phoned local stations asking if there was an emergency. Parents pulled their kids from school. Some even left town. But according to KFWY Channel 8, no emergency alert had been scheduled. They checked their system. No signal had been sent. And the FCC later confirmed no record exists of any EAS activation on that day at that time in that region. But something went out. And at least 42 homes reported receiving the signal, all tuned to different channels, not just one. One viewer, a technician named Grant Fowler, recorded it. He had been testing VHS capture equipment at the time and left the tape running. When he played it back later, the audio was even stranger than he remembered. Buried beneath the main message was another voice, quieter, nearly drowned in static. A single sentence repeated 3 times. "We are not authorized to hold the line." Grant turned the tape over to local police. It was mailed to a lab in Phoenix for analysis. 3 weeks later, the envelope came back. Empty. No report, no apology, no follow-up. Grant called every week for 2 months, then he stopped. Years later, in an interview on an obscure message board about lost media, he said something that never left the thread. The voice in that signal, it wasn't a warning, it was a mistake, like we weren't supposed to hear it. In the 2 years following the broadcast, similar reports emerged in Utah, New Mexico, and Nevada. Short-range hijackings, audio corruption. Messages not tied to any known emergency protocol. Each time, the language was similar. Breach containment, active subject displacement. Theories flooded the early internet. Secret military operations. Dimensional overlap, a government cover-up of something beneath the desert. But the official story never changed. There was no signal. Nothing was sent. Nothing was received, except for one last thing. A local radio operator, Arlo Jenkins, claimed he picked up an open band echo of the signal, a full 9 minutes before it aired on TV. He said it wasn't coming from a broadcast tower. It was coming from somewhere in the desert. When asked to pinpoint the location, he laughed and said, "Same place the lights come from, where roads go straight for hours and then vanish." But the next story isn't about a signal. It's about something that drove out of the dark and never hit the brakes. It drove for miles with no plate, then it vanished into thin air. Highway 93, Arizona, 2001. There's a stretch of Highway 93 between Wickenburg and Kingman that drivers hate at night. No lights, no gas stations, no cell signal, just hundreds of miles of black asphalt, broken fences, and desert that never feels empty. On the night of April 3, 2001, a truck driver named Ellis Crane was heading north on a routine freight run. He was 37 minutes behind schedule and doing close to 70. That's when he saw the headlights. A white pickup truck, too close, riding his bumper like it wanted to pass, but never did. Ellis flashed his hazards, slowed down. Nothing. The pickup stayed tight. Then it drifted into the other lane and kept pace alongside him. He turned his head for a split second and saw no driver. He swerved, nearly lost control. When he looked again, the truck was gone. No headlights. No brake lights, no dust, just desert. Shaken, Ellis called it in when he hit the next way station. They logged it as fatigue. But over the next 6 weeks, 5 other drivers reported the same truck, white, unmarked, no plates, tailing them at high speeds, then vanishing without a trace. One driver claimed it followed him for 11 miles, then passed through a closed checkpoint without stopping. When the highway patrol pulled the surveillance footage from that night, they confirmed something disturbing. The truck does appear. Faint headlights, low silhouette, but the timestamp flickers and the frame skips exactly when it crosses the checkpoint line. The footage resumes on the other side, and the truck is gone. Engineers were brought in to check for tampering. None was found. They pulled footage from a neighboring mile marker camera, one that captured the highway from above. There, in 3 frames, you can see it again. White pickup. No markings. But in the final frame, it's not quite the same shape. Something about the back end is wrong, stretched, almost blurred. The vehicle was entered into a national database. No matches, no stolen reports, no license plate ever attached to it. But things got worse. In late May, a 911 call came from a panicked family traveling northbound with their 2 kids. The father claimed a white truck had been following them for over 20 minutes. They pulled over. The truck didn't. It passed them, and kept passing them. According to the call transcript, the man said, "It's still going. There's no driver. It's just going." The line cut out. They were found hours later, safe, at a rest stop 20 miles up. The father refused to speak to police, but the mother gave a single quote to a local reporter. It wasn't a truck, it was wearing one. Today, that section of Highway 93 has earned a nickname among long-haul drivers, the mile that follows you. Some think it's just a story, some say it's a government vehicle from a test range nearby, and others believe it's something much older, something that uses the road like we do, but for reasons we're not meant to understand. So if you ever find yourself out there, headlights in your mirror, closing the gap, don't brake, don't look, just keep driving. Because if you think that's strange, wait until you see what grew out of the crater they found in the forest. They found a crater in the forest, but it wasn't from a meteor. Apache Sitgreaves National Forest, Arizona, 2008. The Apache Sitgreaves Forest stretches for millions of acres. Pine, dust, thin air, and places that aren't on any official map. In the summer of 2008, 3 hikers from Mesa took a weekend trip near the Black River region, an area known for elk, high ridgelines and absolute quiet. What they found that day wasn't marked on any trail, and it wasn't there the month before. A crater, wide, deep, perfectly round, nearly 30 feet across, edges burned. The surrounding trees blackened like they'd been flash-cooked. There was no debris, no impact fragments. No smell of fuel or chemical residue. Just scorched soil, flattened grass, and silence. One of the hikers, David R., later described it. It didn't feel like a hole in the ground. It felt like the ground had been pushed outward, like something escaped. They took photos, marked GPS coordinates, and reported it to Forest Services when they returned. Within 72 hours, a survey team arrived, but when they reached the site, it was gone. Same location, same trees, but no crater. The ground was smooth, unbroken, no signs of recent digging, only the faint smell of ozone, like the air after a lightning strike. The hikers were dismissed, but David went back 2 weeks later, this time alone, with a drone and a soil sampling kit. The footage he captured still circulates in fringe forums. At 5 minutes into the flight, the drone's camera shakes violently, then cuts to black. Before it dies, the last image shows something strange. A ring of ground that looks lighter than the earth around it, almost bleached. And just beyond the ring, a single tree perfectly intact but with no shadow. When David returned to his car, he found something else. His windshield was warped, like the glass had been exposed to heat. But the inside of the car was cold. He never went back. But his samples were sent to a geology professor at Northern Arizona University. The results? Trace amounts of ionized carbon in the soil, something consistent with short-burst electromagnetic energy. But no lightning strikes had been recorded in the area that month. No storm, no seismic activity, nothing. Over the next few months, 2 other hikers in the region reported disorientation. One said the trees felt wrong. Another said their compass kept spinning, even after the batteries were removed. Eventually, the area was marked off limits for wildfire restoration, but no burn zone has ever been officially documented there. Locals now call it the reset spot, and some believe it's a place where the terrain reboots, like a screen glitching back to normal. Or worse, that it wasn't a crater made by something falling, but by something leaving. Nothing felt real anymore. They remember going to sleep, but morning never came. Tonto National Forest, Arizona, 1992. In late spring of 1992, 4 college students from Tempe drove up to Tonto National Forest for a weekend of camping. They left Friday afternoon. Normal supplies, normal weather. They told their parents they'd be back by Sunday night. They never came home. By Monday morning, none of their phones were picking up signal, not unusual for the forest back then, but still. 2 families reported them missing. A search was launched. Rangers combed known trails, access roads, fire watch stations. On the 3rd day, they were found. All 4 of them, sitting on a log near their campsite, unharmed, confused, and unaware that they'd been missing for almost 4 days. When asked what happened, their answers didn't match. One thought it was Saturday morning. Another swore it had only been one night. They all remembered sitting by the fire. And then nothing. No sunrise, no sense of time passing. Only this. We woke up, and everything felt wrong. The air didn't move. The light wasn't right. Their campsite hadn't been disturbed. No signs of animals, no forced entry. But all 4 of their wristwatches and 1 battery-powered clock were frozen at 2:08 a.m. Investigators wrote it off as disorientation, maybe a shared hallucination brought on by exhaustion or elevation. But the families weren't convinced. One of the students, Kyle, was an amateur photographer. He'd brought a 35mm film camera to document the trip. When the film was developed, the last 10 shots were unreadable, blurry, warped, not like someone moved the camera, but like the environment itself had shifted. In one of the frames, you can just barely make out the edge of a tent, and a tall, narrow shape behind it. Too tall to be a person, too thin to be a tree, just standing still. The negatives were submitted for analysis. Nothing came back. The lab claimed the images had been exposed to radiation or intense light fluctuation. 1 year later, Kyle reportedly started sleepwalking. He would wake up outside, feet dirty, hands trembling. He stopped talking about the trip. The other students moved away. One became a teacher in Oregon. Another joined a church in Montana and changed his name. They've never spoken publicly, but a ranger who assisted in the search said something he's never been able to shake. The fire pit had coals, still warm, but their food was frozen, like someone hit pause, just on them. The case was unofficially nicknamed the Camp with No Morning, and some hikers still avoid that part of the forest altogether, because sometimes time moves wrong, and sometimes when it does, it doesn't fix itself. But if that left you unsettled, the next one might never leave your mind, because the town it happened in never existed. He grew food, paid taxes, and filed reports in a town that doesn't exist. Santa Cruz County, Arizona, 1975 to 1981. From 1975 to 1981, a small agricultural operation called Carmichael Produce was registered in the property records of Santa Cruz County, Arizona, 6 years. Consistent filings, valid tax ID, water permits, crop reports. There's just one problem. There is no record of a town named Carmichael ever existing. Not in state archives, not on any survey maps, not in postal records, nothing. The address listed, 213 Banyan Road, doesn't exist. Never did. But satellite images from the early 1980s show something unusual in that region. A perfect grid, 6 rectangular fields, irrigation lines, and what appears to be 3 identical structures spaced exactly 40 feet apart. By 1983, the land was cleared, the grid erased, and the area reclassified as federal grazing range. The man behind the produce filings was named Walter Hill, aged 57, no criminal record, graduate of a Midwestern agriculture college. He made quarterly shipments of squash, melons, and potatoes to Tucson, verified by at least 2 distribution companies. Drivers who delivered there described it as bare bones, a small settlement. No signs, no people outside, only Walter. One driver said, "He was always waiting out front, like he knew exactly when we'd show up, and we never saw him go back inside." In 1981, the produce orders stopped. The tax ID was closed, and Walter Hill vanished. His name does not appear in any death records. No forwarding address, no surviving relatives. A Freedom of Information Act request filed in 2009 returned a redacted page stating only, "Subject no longer under agricultural classification. Area reassigned to restricted survey zone. Perimeter deactivated." There is no such thing as a restricted survey zone in Santa Cruz County zoning law. And the strangest part? Local ranchers say that during a dry season in the late 1980s, when the topsoil peeled back from the heat, they saw something beneath the surface where the fields used to be. Metal, panels, wiring, like something had been installed, then covered with crops. The area is fenced off now. Unmarked, no road signs, just a long dirt path that leads to a rusted gate and a blank government plate. If you ask locals, most will say it's just a ranch, or they'll shrug, say they've never heard of it. But a few will glance toward the mountains and say, there was something there, it was never supposed to be a town. It was just supposed to look like one, for a while. 6 stories, 6 pieces of desert that don't give anything back, from voices in the radio to footprints that vanish in mid-step. Arizona holds on to its secrets. Thank you for watching all the way through. If something in these stories stayed with you, leave a like to let us know. And if you're still hungry for more, the full playlist is waiting. Just be careful what you click on. Some stories don't like to be opened twice.